the reason that you are all here is for some respect, virtual reality, augmented reality, or some immersive technology, and that's why you're here. So the reason we put on this first slide, the reason we put Benjamin Franklin's quote, "Tell me and I forget, teach me and I remember, but involve me and I learn," is the core fundamental of what we're all about. And what we're all about is immersive technology, and our individual focus is training and education. And so we're going to talk a lot about that. If anybody's into, Marcus is in developing a platform, and Josh, I don't even know it, Josh, he's into bearded beer. But our focus is, on a top level standpoint, is generally training and education, and how VR and shooting 360 immersive specific, or 360 video specifically, affects that. But if you're into gaming, if you're into education, maybe you're doing, what do you do? You're a newspaper guy in the VR world. Welcome. And he's from Ohio?
Well, I just moved here last week.
Okay. And I forgot your name already, but welcome. So, I'm going to tell you briefly, because a lot of you know us, about 360 Immersive. We started in 2001. We're basically a production marketing company. We run around with cameras, we do app development, web development. In early 2015, late 2014, in fact, when the Gear VR first came out, we looked at VR and we said, we have some clients that this might apply to, and we did our first project, which was a recruiting marketing project for Boise State football. So the coaches run around with a set of goggles, and how do you connect kids that are in Texas and California and Kansas to want to come to Boise when all they've heard about is maybe potatoes and blue turf or who knows what. Virtual reality was the thing back there, and it still is today. So it's all about creativity, innovation, and technology. We love our toys. As you can see, we brought some of them with us. We focused and developed a passion for education, for training, for learning, and how this technology can affect you in those regards. We do work for law enforcement, fire, EMS, workplace safety, OSHA-related topics, and it's a very satisfying field because we want to drive fatalities and injuries to zero. So we can walk away at night and we can say we hopefully help people accomplish something good. Okay, what does VR do? It trains in a more meaningful way. You can develop a more confident and knowledgeable workforce. I'm going to run through these fairly fast so we can get to the meat of the conversation. Create a culture of safety accountability. It helps that because we're increasing retention. We're increasing engagement. Bottom line, trainers are always looking for a better bottom line. And like I mentioned, we want to drive fatalities and injuries to zero. So, you all know this, but in case you don't, and maybe you don't, there's two general types of immersive technology. There's computer-based and there's video-based. And sometimes there's a mixed reality, which is kind of a combination of both. And so there's specific advantages. You know, in CGI, you can, if you can imagine it, you can create it within reason. Video is not so much, you have some limitations. It gives you a high level of interactivity. You have, if you choose, you can code it so that you have 6 degrees of freedom. You can move around in that virtual space wherever you want to go. All you guys back there, I mean, stand-up coders, I commend you. He didn't stand up, but there he is. In our case, dangerous scenarios can be simulated. We can put somebody in a trench that's improperly shielded, and guess what? That trench collapses and bad things happen. We can flip over a tanker truck, and You wouldn't do that in real life, but we can do it in a simulated environment, and we can teach and we can train and we can educate. You know, there are some things that gamification may not be for everybody. A lot of organizations want real video, they want real people, and we're going to get to that. Another thing with CGI is that it takes a high degree of knowledge and edification. You have to go out, and whether you're Unreal or whether you're Unity or even Marcus's platform, it takes some degree of knowledge and edification where you can go out and buy a $120 360 camera, plop it on your phone, and you could start shooting 360, and we'll get into that. Now, in case of Marcus's platform, his platform is actually designed to take a lot of the pain and anguish out of learning Unity or learning Unreal. We'll talk more about Unity because we're on that side of the fence. So distribution can also be a challenge. If you go out today and you popped your phone up with your little 360 camera ball on top, you streamed it live to Facebook, you're running content right now. And we could teach you to do that if you don't know how in 10 or 15 minutes. CGI based takes a little bit longer than that. So what's the great thing about real video? Guess what? It's real people. It's you. And it's you. You look kind of bored today, but what'd you do to your hand?
Like that.
Okay. Don't do it again. You have a high level of detail in the scenes. You've got real, Marcus has got a stain on his shirt. We'll see that. You have processes and procedures and tactics that you can see in specific detail because it's as real as it gets because it is real. The only difference between that and traditional video is you're actually in the middle of it. You feel like you're immersed and they're in the scene versus passively watching it. What are some of the challenges? Well, frankly, it's on the rail. If I move the camera over here, even though it's a 360 environment, the viewer goes with me. In a computer-based scenario, the viewer can walk around wherever he chooses to if it's coded that way. It's interactively challenged. Yes, if we pull video into a Unity environment, we can add hotspots and we can add secondary content. We can do a lot, but it takes a high degree of technical ability to be able to do that beyond just going out shooting and producing 360 video. A real plus, as I mentioned, $120 will put you in the game. So you can go out, instead of buying that nice dinner and that glass of wine, and you could buy a 360 camera and start shooting today. Ease of distribution. You can push it out to Facebook, YouTube. There's a number of different platforms. You can if you want to show your friends on your laptop, you can load up the free GoPro player, or VLC now supports 360 video. Throw a video in and you're off to the races. So each different type of technology has pluses and minuses, and depending on your need and ambition and dedication to the technology. So we started, like I mentioned, almost 4 years ago, and a lot of these cameras were, do I have a pointer? Maybe I don't. You know, they felt like they were duct taped together, and then GoPro came out with the, or maybe it was Google, with the Odyssey, so there's 16 GoPros strapped together. We bought an off-brand of one of these, but we decided that by the time we did the 10 unit here, which is our first real production camera, that stitching together 10 4K video streams was hard enough, and stitching together 16 video streams was something we didn't want to get into. So we actually, in the early years, we had 6 cameras, we had 4 cameras, we had 2 cameras, but they were all GoPro based. And a lot of people started that way. We bought Nikon. Somebody mentioned Nikon. Yeah, the dynamic range on those little Nikons were horrible. I mean, they were compact and all of that, and better than what we had before, but it was bad. So in conjunction with different cameras, we can hang them off of drones, we can hang them off a rig that we built to support motorcycle, and of course you have live streaming. So there's 10 times more cameras on the market today than is represented here. And you can have every variation. We'll touch a little bit on the decisions to make when choosing a camera, but I just wanted to give you something that we started with, which is essentially rubber bands. Okay, when you're looking at camera purchase decisions, are you consumer based? You just want to play around? And I mentioned the $120 camera. Is it prosumer? You want to kind of get there and maybe build a business out of it, or are you wanting to build a business and you need to step into the professional level? So those are probably one of the first questions you have to ask yourself. Budget and application. Are you looking at doing training? Are you looking at shooting music videos? Are you looking at shooting family weddings? I mean, there's so many applications, and each one can have a camera that's more or less tailored to that, and they could be different in pricing and costs. So action cam like that, little tiny camera, shoots 5.7, great little camera. We'll get into a little later on. More of a professional grade, something like that. Not as easy to haul around, but it shoots a lot better looking picture. Comes back to resolution. A lot of little cameras are sub 4K. 4K sounds like a lot. 4K is a lot when you're looking at an image like this. 4K is not so much when you wrap it all around. So the better the experience your viewers have, the more that your content has impact and meaning. 4K, 5.7. I mentioned that these little cameras shoot 5.7K in pixels. Today I probably wouldn't buy, unless you're just looking for something to play with, I wouldn't buy a 4K camera. I'd look for something a little higher. And these run about $600–700 now. They're pretty inexpensive. 8K and above, that camera shoots 8K. And the biggest problem with processing 8K video at 250 meg data rate is that it'll kill just about any computer out there. So usually you want to shoot at the highest resolution, and then you'll down-res it to be able to work with it. So shooting resolution versus distribution. I mentioned shooting at 8K. Absolutely. Store it on the hard drive. Shoot at 8K. If you're going to do something for the Vive, or if you're going to do something for the Rift, you want to run it at 4K. If you're going to go out to mobile, and that mobile has to deal with an iPhone 6 as the least common denominator, you're going to run it 2K, or maybe even a little less.
Are you going to talk more about viewing devices' current state on resolution, or is that a good time
If you
to
have
ask?
something that I'm on,
What's the Oculus Go eating up right now? Do you know?
the Go, we run 4K on
4K, okay, that's
Yeah.
right.
I'm just saying, if you're going out to iOS or Android and you don't know what device that you're going to be playing on, we run 2K video.
Do you have a device that runs 8K?
We don't have a device that'll run 8K.
The Vive Pro, maybe? The Vive Pro, HTC Vive Pro, the new one? Does it run 8K?
I've never tried. Have we ever tried 8K on the Vive?
I don't think we have.
Let me tell you.
I was curious.
I mean, 8K
That's a lot of data.
is a lot.
Well, the resolution of the human eye is only like 1K, isn't it? I think your eye only sees 1K anyway, so anything more you're just zooming in.
Well, I think your eye sees quite a bit, but like you said, when you're talking about, you know, if it's right in front of you like that, but then when you spread it out, you're seeing just a fraction of that.
Yeah, so please, in any part of this discussion, jump in. This is a discussion. I'm just running through my crib notes here. It's really what it comes down to, just to kind of get the conversation going. And I know Marcus has a lot to say.
I do have a question there on that point. Can you like somehow describe how 4K looks like. I have a hard time finding good words. So for me, 4K in a Vive looks blurry. There is a significant level of blurriness. It looks awesome, but the moment you focus in on anything, it looks a little bit blurry. Do you have like 2K versus 4K versus 8K in an all-around? How would you describe this typically?
Well, there's more detail. You know, anytime that you go through compression or you shoot at a given resolution, you're making compromises and sacrifices. That can be color, and there's a whole color science and encoding and H.264 and H.265 and in fact, I was just actually looking at, we did a test for a gentleman it's kind of some forensics kind of stuff, and he was more interested in resolution than anything else. And 8K looks better than 4K. If you're just looking around and experiencing it, you probably won't notice. If you still it, you're going to see a difference. Probably what has the biggest difference is the device that you're looking at on. You know, what's the resolution on an iPhone 5 or 6 versus what's the resolution on an Oculus Go? I think the Oculus Go is an awesome piece of hardware. It's all going to get better. You know, it's just, you know, what we're talking about today is going to be old news a year from now. Yeah, price comes down. Oculus Go, we used to recommend doing either Samsung Galaxy 6 or an iPhone 6 and buy refurbished. So if you're buying a lot of them, like 30 or 40 for a classroom, and these little Bobo VRs, which are about $25, but at that amount, you're paying $225 to $230, and you can buy a Go for $199, and it's designed for VR, and you don't have to kind of keep the phone and the headset together, and it's getting better.
And I just want to add, I think I could imagine like in a virtual world, you have like a magnifying glass. I'm looking over here at this drone right here, and you can see all the detail on it and stuff like that. If I had like a little virtual magnifying glass with the 8K, then it would be almost like I would be standing like a foot from it, and you would see all the little letters, and you could read all the letters and stuff like that. That would be my understanding. Is that kind of?
Yeah, if you guys ever want to play with some stuff, we can send you some 8K video.
Yeah.
And, just send me an email, or it's pretty big.
Yeah. It's I can just distinguish all the pixels. The pixels are just there's 8,000 of them per what inch? Is that what it is?
No, it's actually total. That's
actually
what made it say.
total. Okay.
It's total.
Yeah.
That's not an
Yeah,
operating
that wouldn't be
machine.
perfect. Yeah.
Annie, that would be a
Quite
really, really interesting challenge for the IVRC. Get the Silvergraph guys on board and get one of their top secret 8K devices, do exactly the same video on those versus an HTC Vive, classic Bear Vive, and let us look through those. I would love to see an 8K. I've heard only from people who saw it and they go like, it's such a difference to 4K. And I'm like, give me words to describe this, but I would love to see this.
Looks
actually.
cool.
Have you seen it?
No, I'm just giving you the words.
So less screen door effect is what I've heard. You know, you don't see the little, they're not pixels, but you know, that effect. Yeah, I'd love to see one. If you get one, let me know.
Yeah, for sure.
So what is the resolution for, let's say, Google Street View?
Say that again.
The resolution in Google Street View, what's the resolution they are using? Google Street View?
Oh, Street View.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Google Street View?
Yeah.
What is the resolution they are using?
I don't know, but this camera will shoot Street View at 8K. So I don't know as far as the Google cars, you know, when you see them running around the thing on top, I don't know.
Oh,
But
but
I know this one's certified for Street View, so it's at least 8K.
Yeah.
So
Because you can do zoom. You're talking about that, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah, that makes sense.
any other thoughts?
This is an unrelated thought, but it's weather. You can't, none of these can handle rain and snow. You can think about, can you?
Sure, I put this in a fish tank.
No,
Oh, you did?
Yeah. Not that,
Not that.
but this.
How about the,
So-
I got one. How about stitching these together? What kind of software do you use to stitch video?
Are you always the guy that jumps ahead in the PowerPoint, aren't you? Okay, we'll get there. Yeah. Yeah, so that's another thing when it comes to resolution. I mentioned that this camera shoots 8K at 250 meg. When we go out for mobile, we're at what? At 2K at 20, are we what? Yeah, because it works well and it seems to be a good compromise. And we also have to look at if people are downloading the image, you know, video, you have to take that into consideration. So there's always compromises in this business. If you could have something to play full res off of that camera, the image would always look good, but you're probably not going to play it on that phone right there. Okay, so in the old days, I mentioned that we used to take 10 GoPro cameras in a rig, shoot them, try to get them all lined up, stitch them together, and that was your image. And in fact, a lot of the imagery in our demo app is that kind of footage. It's a labor-intensive task. You don't have to do that anymore. A lot of cameras will self-stitch. Now you're making a compromise in resolution, usually at about 4K or even a little bit under 4K if you're going to self-stitch. So if that resolution, including the data rate, works for you, then you won't be stitching. But let's say that you want to shoot at a high res and you're willing to post-process it, which doesn't necessarily mean that you have to stitch it. You're just running it through the processor and the camera based on its internal template, and the software on your system will stitch it for you. And it may, if you go out and shoot a good chunk of video, it may take overnight to do, depending on how much horsepower you have in the computer. But at the end of the day, when you come in the morning, you have some pretty nice video at 8K, or you can down res it to 5K, which is what we do, or 4K, depending on what your system will handle, and then edit accordingly. The nice thing is, you archive the video at 8K, and in future needs, you have the footage available at a higher resolution when phones can easily play 4, 5, 6, 7, 8K video, which the day will come. I can't tell you when. So that stitch or not to stitch, does anybody have an Omni? GoPro Omni? People went out and bought GoPro Omnis. It was kind of that transition thing. You got to stitch that. National Interagency Fire, those folks up there bought an Omni and they go, man, you got to stitch this stuff. That's just an example of a camera that, you know, kind of was on that cusp between real-time stitching and you got to go ahead and put it together. So I wouldn't buy a camera that didn't stitch, but what we do is that we generally we'll capture at the highest resolution, we'll post-stitch it, and then we'll edit accordingly. Battery life, spatial audio. Spatial audio, you said you love audio, right? What if your camera doesn't have spatial audio? I have a slide for that, but yeah, there's other ways to deal with it. This little camera, this shoots spatial audio. This guy does over here too. How many people use it? But it's part of the VR experience. Monitoring your camera. You know, you're in the frame. If you're standing next, you can't, like Zach's sitting back behind that camera right now, you can't do that. Sorry, you can do that, but you're going to be in the shot. So you got to go high. So how do you do it? Well, most cameras nowadays allow an app that you can at least monitor a point of view. And some of them you can monitor audio. And I'm taking too much time with this, so I'm going to jump through. Dynamic range. I mentioned the little Nikon, which we had a bunch of those before those cameras for action cameras. They were good cameras, but the dynamic range was horrible. And if you don't know what dynamic range is, it's the ability to capture highlights and darks and to be able to to image between the two, and the higher the dynamic range, the better it gets closer to what we see as humans. The Nikon, if we shot in here, this would be totally blown out. You wouldn't see any detail at all because it had such low dynamic range. These little cameras actually will do a pretty good job. Okay, I'm going to jump through here. We all know what a tripod is, right? So a typical tripod has big legs. We like these little things, little legs. So when you're shooting a 360 camera, you take a big tripod like that, you put a VR camera on, you see this big chunk underneath it. You see this, and it's pretty easy to paint out. You know, VR stuff, when VR first came out, there wasn't these massive industrial giants creating VR mounts and stuff. And so you make your own. Like this is a painter pole, standard camera tripod, and then we purchase different painter poles depending on what we need to mate to the legs. And it's a small footprint for the legs, and you can pick what you choose. And same with this. If you notice, this is just literally something you can buy in Lowe's for $10. Painter pole. Gimbals, they have, especially for the action cam, these small cameras, they've come out with a number of handheld gimbals. You're still in the shot somehow, but at least it will stabilize the footage. We'll get into camera stabilization because we don't use a gimbal because these cameras self-stabilize if you post-process it, and I'll touch on that. Selfie sticks. Who hasn't used a selfie stick? Who hasn't seen 360 video like this? Skiing, snowboarding, and it's great, except you're always looking at, if you turn around, you're always looking at the guy. It's just part of, but it's a different style of mount. Helmet mounts. We would absolutely, for the first 2.5 years, never put a VR camera on a helmet because you'll make people sick. It's best practices. This little Garmin self-stabilizes so that you can actually put a mount. You can put something like this if you want to set it off a little bit, or you can make it a little shorter like this, and it works really well. In fact, you can run around the block with it and it will stabilize to the point it looks like it's on a rail. And that's the Garmin. Because it has geometrics data that it understands where it is in 3D space, and it will stabilize it. In fact, it'll try to stabilize this. We've tried that, and it does a pretty good job of it. We did a bunch of work for BLM with the smoke jumpers, and they really wanted us to put a camera on their helmet, and we said, you can't do it, you'll make people sick. It'll be a poor experience. Today, if we were going to shoot that same thing, we would, because you can stabilize it. Drones, we got lots of drones here. This guy we keep around because it can pick up a bigger camera. We do this little guy. You can pull out of your backpack, and you got a flying VR camera. That if you're familiar with the Mavic Pro is a pretty revolutionary. It's by DJI, amongst other drones by the same company. But we came up with a way to hang the thing. It kind of looks DIY, and it is DIY, but there you go. So how do you take a guy out of the shot? Let's say you want to do a tour, or let's say you want to get involved with some team action, and that's why we built this thing. It's because we wanted something that was, when I walk, I naturally go up and down. Now I can stabilize this way, but I still have that feeling that if you're running a rover, unless you're running it through the sagebrush, that you're a lot smoother, and so it's a lot easier to deal with that. So if you're doing facility tours, if you're training, if you're if you're doing anything that you want to dynamically move that camera with the team or with the process or the tactic that's being portrayed, that's what the rover's in. And this is just a 5th scale dune buggy that we stripped down and built back up. So again, for us, this whole world is a little bit of DIY, but there's nothing wrong with that because you see a need and you build it. You know, I mentioned motorcycle. We do a lot of motorcycle training, and so we built a mount that actually hangs the ball out here because you can turn around and see the rider, but more importantly, you can look down and you can see his hands, you can see the gauges, you can see the tilt, you can see what he's doing. We tried cameras behind him. It didn't work out. All you did is see him in the back of his helmet. You know, on the handlebars, it didn't give a feeling of riding, but if you put that camera right here, you actually feel like you're riding on the bike. We've never done a cable cam. I know people have, and I'm sure that you will see VR cable cams soon on ESPN, but it's just the same way they run a cable cam now. You're going to see it in VR. And who doesn't like to go diving with their, you mentioned, can you take them underwater? This is good to like 160 feet, I think. Any other questions on mounts? By the way, you end up collecting like just boxes of just stuff. If you look over there's a whole box of this kind of stuff. Because you attach cameras to cars and you just end up needing it. Or I just like gadgets, I don't know, one or the other.
Speaking on cable cams, cable cam mounts, you want to see a good version of it, next month at the X Games, watch it on Facebook because it'll be in 360 video for cable cams.
You know, I'm standing right under this air conditioning and I can't hear a word you say.
I said the X Games next month will be implementing cable cam for 360 video. So if you want to watch it on Facebook, you can watch 360 video.
Cool. And I don't know what he said, but I think it's cool. Yeah, thanks. I mean, I'm right under here and I can't hear very well anyhow, so. Spatial audio. I'm gonna keep running through this because, you can decide whether you want to shoot spatial or stereo. The Zoom H2N is an older 2-channel recorder, like that's a 6N up there on that camera. But it's got some firmware. If you want to shoot spatial, you can take a camera that doesn't necessarily shoot spatial audio and record it wild, and you can mate it with it. Yeah, how do you handle your talent? How do you mic your talent? Well, you can't, in the traditional way, you can't take a boom mic and an audio guy because he's going to be in the shot. So, you know, that's something to consider when you're setting up your scene. How do you monitor audio? Some of the apps will allow you to monitor audio, or you can actually take a feed off one of the audio interfaces and wireless. We haven't set that up yet, but it can be done. Everybody know what recording wild means? You have a separate recorder versus the camera, you clapper it, you sync them up in post. Event. Event is tough. If you're trying to run off a mic and you got an air conditioner and you got a roomy noise and you got all this stuff going on, if you can take a feed, like I'm running a wireless lab, but if you can come off from a board, you're going to get a lot cleaner. I think I'd almost rather be cool than not here. Live streaming. Who wants to live stream? Anybody live stream? Yeah, there you go. How about 360 live streaming? Okay. That camera does it really well. If you get, again, run through an audio interface and manage the audio. That's one of the biggest challenges. Yeah, this camera we can only go out to one at a time, so usually it's Facebook. Yeah.
You could do it on YouTube.
YouTube Live, yeah. Okay, we mentioned you got to hide. We've got all kinds of different. Where do you take your camera? Where do you put your camera if you're blocking out your talent? You know, people think about 360 video. They think that, well, people all the time are looking around. Well, that's really not the case, because most of the time I'm looking about what's kind of in front of me. I may look back and forth, and so when you think about your point of view, like I want to talk about newspaper guys that have imported themselves from Ohio to Boise, Idaho. I'm going to be right here. I'm not going to be over here and then have to have you look. Likewise, if you happen to have a point of view on different shots in the editing process, you want to shift that video, because you can shift the point of view, and so that I'm not constantly going here and then the scene cuts and then I've got to look over here. You want to kind of manage where the viewer's looking, but remember, for the most part, even in a 360 environment, they're going to look forward most of the time. So what does that do for you? It allows you to manage your shots better. You don't necessarily have to worry as much about what's going on all the time behind, unless it's important. And if it's important, then use something to draw the viewer over there, and audio cues are generally a good way to do it. Something goes bang or pop or somebody yells, but get their attention over there. Or shift the scene so it's over here. They're looking here, and then the next cut you want to shift it in, pull the scene over so they don't have to do the ping pong. Blocking your talent, lighting the scene. If we were shooting VR right now and I wanted video lights in here, what do you think I'm going to see? Video lights. So you can hide them, you can try to hide them, but it's challenging. Sometimes you just got to go with what you got or get really creative. Moving the camera, like I mentioned, there's all kinds of different ways of moving the camera, putting it on somebody's head. I can take this selfie stick, like here, this little guy, and I can walk around like that, which we've done a lot in the early days. You see the top of my head if you look down, but you can put a cap on it. You can do a little branding, cover up my hair. Shooting in a vehicle. We made a lot of mistakes shooting in a vehicle. We, you have bright sunshine outside, and you have relatively dark interior from like a patrol car. And so we usually take two little LED panels and put underneath the camera. It kind of kicks up and brightens it, and then we drop the camera's two stops. So it doesn't, when it's trying to adjust whether to go inside or outside, that we'll see detail in the windows, but we'll still have enough detail that we can bring it up in post in the interior of the car. So shooting vehicles is fun. You get, especially if the guys like to do 100 miles an hour. We've shot race cars up at Firebird at 240. And VR is great for that, because nobody ever gets to do under 240 miles an hour for 6 seconds except the driver. Now you can experience that. This first time we tried this, we crashed it because I mounted this, I bolted that to that. So this thing swings a little bit, and it starts to get worse. And if you don't have the flexibility in being able to have them balance independently, it gets worse and it gets worse, and suddenly it ends up down. But once you put a joint in there, so the drone can self-stabilize and the camera can swing freely, and you can stabilize this footage so it looks pretty good. You can take a little drone in the backpack and a little camera in the backpack and go shoot all the 360 footage you want. I have great footage of that, by the way. It goes as it crashes. If you're shooting, it's sometimes good to get, especially if you're shooting from a tripod, take your phone and shoot some textures of the flooring. Because if you want to paint it out later on, that you might use that. You know, Mocha, if you track your footage, let's say I have the rover driving like this, I can grab footage in there and mat it in here, and that rover just goes away. But sometimes, you know, it takes you 2 seconds to grab a piece of texture, and it might be beneficial. Camera audio, just pay attention to audio, because if you have great video and really bad audio, it's a bad piece. If you have great audio and kind of marginal video, you know, most people get along with it. Bad audio will always create a worse presentation than bad video. Shot management. Take notes, clapper your audio if you're going to shoot it wild. File management more than anything else. How many times do you have all these different shots and all these different files floating around, and if you don't manage it correctly, you have just created a nightmare for yourself, especially if it's a big shoot. Yeah. All right, stitching in the old days, you know, like I mentioned, we had many cameras. You have to sync them all up, and you got to stitch them all together. It was a labor-intensive process. I mean, it took hours and hours and hours to make a scene, to make one scene. Today, you don't have to do that. Yeah, RTS, real-time stitching, or post-processing, or both. Some cameras shoot, if you tell it to real-time stitch, it'll give you that real-time stitch, and then it'll shoot the high-res, the individual files, so you can stitch them or process them later on, which is the best of both worlds. Camera utilities. Most cameras now come with a whole suite of utilities that you can use that make your job easier. They either do the stitching for you, do the processing. Some of them do light editing. You know, we happen to use Adobe as far as for our editing, but some of them you can get along with it. Stabilization and horizon correction. This is an amazing little camera because it captures data from both accelerometers and GPS, and that uses that to stitch and correct. In fact, it can do overlays, so I can get acceleration, I can get speed, I can get distance, I can get a map overlay if you want to overlay it on Google Earth or Google Maps, all from this little camera. So, back in the old days, and we have in the last year used Video Stitch once. We had both seats for Video Stitch and color, which is auto panel video. And like I say, it's labor intensive, but if you're looking for that fine tuning that maybe your camera can't do from its software, maybe you want to jump back into that. We had one situation where we had a stitch line that we just hated, and so we went back in and fixed it. We use Adobe. You know, the Premiere and After Effects has a whole suite of VR tools now, so I'm sure that Apple's come up to speed, and I don't know what you all use or what you want to use, but we use Adobe. Managing the point of view, I brought that up before, where you can actually shift the viewer's point of view so they don't constantly have to be bouncing back and forth. You can manage your video shots so that they have a kind of a smooth experience in where they're looking. 2D video in a 360 world. Wouldn't it be great if you can put the detail of how to take this kink out of this hat right here that he sat on accidentally and put it in a 360 environment? Well, you can do that. It's a post-process. You can take detail video, which is your phone video or video off of that camera of a process or procedure, and lay it into a 360 environment or instruction. A shot of me up here talking for way too long, and I'm laying this into a 360 world, and so I get that instruction of an individual, and I can put it into 360 content. So you marry the two technologies. Lower thirds, graphics, animation that allow a richer environment, all of those, just as they go into traditional video, they go into 360 video. Same with editing and transitions. There are VR transitions that folks have come up with. We don't use them much, but they're out there. They're in Premiere, and I'm sure you can buy packages. Same with effects and color correction. So we talked about output resolution and data rates. I'm not going to cover that. Distribution, how do you distribute this? You guys pretty much know this stuff. It's either on mobile, it's in WebGL. WebGL is still a technology that needs to be polished out a little bit, but it's different pipelines. Once you create your content, push it out there in different ways. Put it out on Facebook, put it out on YouTube, put it out, build a mobile app and put it out. Show your friends. Anyhow, I hope I haven't droned too far. Drone. I was kind of making that a play of words, but I didn't see too many people laughing. Okay. Anyhow, any questions? Any thoughts? Was it beneficial? You guys need more detail in things like this. Yeah, just go to look for. Well, it's what's that thing called, Zach? We have about 10 or 12 of them out there, but the portfolio app is. Yeah. So who all's thinking about shooting video versus maybe coding it or coding it? Who wants to shoot it? Or did you guys just hear about this and nothing else to do?
No, shoot it. But I have a question for you. Do you ever get a client that says, "Oh, I really want a 360 video," but what their end result is doesn't really need 360 video? How do I put this?
I'll give you an example.
Well,
I know exactly where you're going.
Well, people say, well, once TV came, nobody was going to listen to radio anymore. Once the internet came, nobody was going to watch TV anymore. So, but all those things have a little niche, and they all do something that none of them can do, just like So, how do you convince somebody that doesn't need 360 video, that really thinks it's the thing to have? Or how do you convince them otherwise that, hey, if you have it?
So here's the difference. Here's how we look at it. There are great applications for 360 video, and especially in circumstances that are situationally aware. I'm looking around this room and I can see each one of you. I can look behind me and look at this panel. There are applications that you go, boy, it doesn't really feel, it feels like I should just take a video camera or take my phone and shoot this. But the one difference that appeals to a lot of businesses and more is that it's a connection and it's different. If their people are continually used to looking at video and they're sated, they're saturated with it, it doesn't seem to be having any effect anymore. But it's a topic like, we had one group that called us in call center folks. Okay? So call center, I mean, it's like a bunch of people talking on the phone. How could that be an application for 360 video? But their interest was that you could build empathy for not only the person dealing with the guy that's mad on the phone, but also putting them in their shoes and understanding why they're upset, why they're mad. And so it's not necessarily because it's a visual aspect, it's because of a connection that is different than traditional video or PowerPoint slides or pictures or anything else. And another one is the Army is looking at an application for dentistry. Dentistry, okay, it's right there. I mean, they're doing that. Well, their issue is contamination and hygiene and all the things that we don't even think about, that dentists in general, but in this case. And it is that connection. We have an app that teaches folks about understanding schizophrenia. Well, in this case, there's a real application because we can actually put somebody in the place of they experience what people suffering from schizophrenia, color shifting, the blurred vision, the voices, everything's all around them, and it's irritating, it's a nagging, and then we shift back to a law enforcement point of view. And so to help them understand that this is, even though you don't understand that is their reality, that maybe understanding that their reality is going to be different than that law enforcement personnel, that maybe the outcome when they get aggressive might be a little different than, well, what they're trained to do is they're trained to do. So VR can give you a different reality. I mean, we think VR is kind of cool, right? Everybody wouldn't, I mean, we're all here, right? You guys have experienced alternative realities since you grew up. Who's read a book? Anybody? Josh, no. Okay, who's seen a great movie that you were so involved with that you just couldn't understand that the movie's over because you were so tied into the plot? Television, all of these things are alternative realities in things that we think are really commonplace. So technology today gives us the ability to put ourselves in a position to understand circumstances, as in training or entertainment or gaming, but also to build empathy and connection and understanding about somebody else's world.